taking it back one block at a time. And that's what we did. And it quelled it. And unfortunately, times that we're in now, with what went on this summer, and Lord knows what's going to come next summer, because you could see the writing on the wall with what's the shooting. I mean, we had a couple of warm days, and the amount of shootings and stabbings that happen. If we don't get someone else in the police department, like an animal, we're in really bad times.
And Louis Anamone, well, outside of LinkedIn, because I connected with Louis on LinkedIn. He probably just saw he's like, yeah, sure, whatever. But he doesn't, I don't think he knows I exist. Louis, if by chance you stumble upon this episode, come on. You know you want to.
I'll send him a message.
I appreciate that because, well, you know what, to your point, I guess with anything, you need continuity to be able, because I had a joke with somebody. I said, and the NYPD has had about as many commissioners as Spinal Tap has had drummers, which is, you go back to 2014, there was Bill Bratton for a couple of years. And then, Bill was 69 when he retired. It was time. I mean, he did his thing. Then it was James O'Neill, who was on this podcast. Nice guy. And then it's
I knew Jimmy. He was a former transit cop. Mm-hmm. I knew him. Again,
very down to earth guy. I enjoy talking with him.
Pretty much. Mm-hmm. The end didn't turn out as it should have, I believe, but he has to live with that.
Yeah, and then there was Dermot Shea that's in now, and I'm wondering, I'm like, it's a tough thing to navigate between everything obviously that's going on. Plus, you're still in the throes of this pandemic, which just killed some cops, unfortunately. So it's really it's a tough spot to be in. But listen, he's a smart guy. He's been on the job a long time.
It's also a tough spot to be in when you're the head. For Commissioner Shea, I feel for him greatly. Because, I don't know him personally. I never had the pleasure of meeting him. But everything I've ever heard about him was that he was a good cop and a good boss, and I never heard a bad word about him. But as the police commissioner, it's your job. Yes, you're hired you serve at the pleasure of the mayor. I get it. But you are in charge of the largest police department in the world. Okay? Mm-hmm. That serves the largest population in the world.
8 million people.
35,000 more or less officers that have to take care of 8.5 million citizens, not including the people that come in to the city every day to work, and the tourism. Well, now again, because of COVID, that's down.
But when it ramps back up again,
we've had an incredible amount of flight from the city for people leaving. Mm-hmm. But it's a tough job. But you've got to be left alone to run your job as you see fit. You're supposed to have the confidence and the backing of the mayor and the city council. That's why you were picked. And I know he's his own man, and I know it kills him inside sometimes, the decisions he has to make. But we all know that the mayor, de Blasio, and the lunatics in the city council in New York are running the show. And it's a very sad time in that you're handcuffing the police. You're not allowing the cops to do their job. Just the removal of the plainclothes anti-crime units. That's something that was unheard of. I did 6 years in anti-crime. You mentioned Billy Cannon before. I think he did 8, because he was not only an anti-crime cop, he was an anti-crime supervisor.
Yeah, something like that. Before he went to homicide, which I think in '97.
I never met any detective in my career that didn't do a stint in precinct level anti-crime, or what was citywide anti-crime, or known as street crime, or at the very least, was an undercover or plainclothes in narcotics. And usually when you're a detective in narcotics, you stay in narcotics. as a detective. It's very rare that detectives transfer over. They might go to Intel or whatever, but I'm talking about to go to the homicide squad or something. Not many of them are narcotics detectives, you know. But that being said, you learn to ply your trade as a plainclothes cop. See, the thing about policing is, if you're into it and that's your calling, is you're always hungry. Your first thing is you're in the academy. You want to get out. You want to get out on that street. You know, you want to wear that uniform. You want to do good. Now you're walking around. Now you see the guys in the cars. That's your next thing. I want to get what they call a seat. I want to get a steady seat in a car and have a steady sector with a steady partner and, you know, respond to jobs and do things. Then the next progression is to get into plain clothes. And then from plain clothes, that's the career path into the detective bureau. That's where you learn your people skills. That's where you learn to communicate. That's where you learn to develop confidential informants. That's where you learn to watch people and observe their moves, because you're not there. Yes, you will respond to, you know, a call of a man with a gun or shots fired or a robbery in progress. Yes, you will respond to that. And of course, you will put it over the radio that there are, be advised, there are plainclothes units responding, so you don't get confused. If, you know, when the uniforms come, if they see a guy in civilian clothes with a gun in his hand, you know, there have been unfortunate accidents that have happened. But with that being said, basically your job is to just observe people, to go to the areas where the highest amount of crime occurs, where the most shootings occur, where the most robberies occur. And you watch people. You learn what to look for. You become hunters. And the criminals become your prey. You learn to watch. Let's say there's two individuals, and, you know, you see them walking up the block and they're pulling on door handles of cars. What are they looking for?
Looking to rob.
Obviously, they're looking to break into a car.
Yeah, of course.
So, you know, you learn to pick up on that, or you learn how, you know, even someone like I, who's been carrying a gun, you know, for almost 40 years, you know, I do certain things that I'm aware of, you know, where, you know, when I leave the house, you know, you pat your back pocket, I got my wallet, got my keys, got my car keys, you know, I got my gun. So, or, you know, you might hike up your pants or something. It's certain little overt.
Certain little tells, yeah.
Right. And again, right, just like in poker, there are tells. And again, we're trained to carry weapons and you know, have them on us every day. Now, you have a kid in the street, a young guy in the street, he's not accustomed. He's not trained in the use and carrying of a firearm. You know, he's carrying a gun in sweatpants with no holster. So he's constantly touching it, hiking up his pants. So you get to see these overt moves, these overt gestures, which raises your senses and gives you what's called reasonable suspicion. Okay? And now you observe harder. Maybe he pulls up his shirt. You see that gun. Okay? Or maybe you see that bulge. Okay? That raises your level. And again, that's where the stop, question, and frisk came into effect. Your suspicions, and based on your training and your knowledge and the amount of arrests you've made, you felt that this person was armed. So you stopped them and you questioned them. You know, it's 4 o'clock in the morning and they're out in the street wearing all black. You know, there's not a soul in the street, but they're there. Right away, that raises your level, you know?
And they're not going to work.
Maybe the guy's just out to smoke a cigarette. I mean, that's possible. But again, if you saw that bulge and you're questioning the individual is, you know, is telling you, you know, well, I live upstairs and I just came down for smoke. I'm not allowed to smoke in the house. Okay, fine.
Yeah, leave me.
Have a nice day.
Yeah.
But if the guy doesn't know where he is, or he's stuttering, he's stammering, he's starting to sweat, you know, you put your hand on his chest, you could literally see his heart beating through his chest. And that raises, again, now you have more reason to maybe pat this individual down. That's the frisk part. You've stopped him, you've questioned him. He's not answering questions properly. He's avoiding questions. He's avoiding eye contact. He's not answering the questions, according to what you're asking. He's very nervous. All these tells, like you said, these come from your training and your observation skills that you learn. So now, for your own safety, you pat the individual down. Not go in his pockets. You pat him down. Now you feel that big bulge. That, again, from your experience, that's a gun.
Yes.
So now you go and get it. And now he's under arrest. Okay? Now, again, what happened with the stop, question, and frisk was the city went overboard. And they started making it part of a police officer's activity. I mean, they talk about quotas and things like that. But if you're assigned to a steady sector in a radio car, you're expected to make a certain amount of arrests, issue a certain amount of summonses. That's called productivity. That shows that you're doing your job. Because yes, there are days you could be out there for an entire shift, a Sunday afternoon, entire shift, and nothing. The radio's dead. Nothing's going on.
Which is ideal, I imagine.
Well, yeah, it's a rare occasion. Or a snowstorm. It's quiet.
Nobody's on the street.
Or it's pouring rain. It's pouring rain. It's freezing out. Streets are dead. Okay? So, again, you might respond to jobs, but at the end of the month, when you hand in your activity reports to your, commanding officers, and the commanding officer might say, well, Wagner, I see, you only have one arrest, in the last 2 months. Well, Captain, if you see, I've taken 150 complaint reports in the last 2 months. So I didn't actually have time to effect an arrest. There was no arrests to be made.
Right.
It's all about productivity, and motivation and getting the cops to do their jobs. Yes, because it's easy to look the other way at times. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen. I didn't do it, and people I work with didn't do it, but it's done. It's not an oddity. It happens. But again, they started to use it as a piece of activity. You had to hand in a certain amount of those forms, those stop, question, and frisk forms, and that's what ruined it. That's what made it a problem. And then again, they came to some kind of a decision that the majority of the cops that were getting into combat situations were the plainclothes cops. So let's do away with them. Well, of course, they're the majority of the guys getting into the combat situations because they're the gun cops. They're the guys that are going after the most violent offenders and, the ones who are doing the robberies and the street crime and the one that are doing the shootings and carrying the guns. So, of course, they're more likely to get into a situation than an average uniformed officer.
I mentioned this to Bill Ryan, and we're talking with Scott Wagner here on the Mike Newham podcast. It's been a great conversation so far. Bill was in street crime for a little bit. I think it was not, I'm not knocking him. I'd actually like to get him on the show too. But I'm just saying, I think this is just what he did. Ray Kelly, when he came back as commissioner in 2002, I think it was him that got rid of street crime. I think he was the guy that got rid of it.
I don't recall. I was already in the detective bureau when it happened. But I know they got rid of them, and they were a highly, highly effective unit. Highly effective unit.
Our mutual buddy Duty Run was in street crime.
One of the greatest plainclothes units in history was the transit decoy squad that was led by, the legendary Jack Maple, who, was the one who formed the CompStat for the NYPD.
Yep.
I mean, these guys were incredible actors. And some would say, oh, it's entrapment. No, it's not entrapment.
You don't have to go up and rob the guy. Yeah.
But they went out there and risked their lives. I mean, some of them took pretty good beatings or whatever.
It's on YouTube.
But let me tell you, they made some outrageous arrests, and they were legendary. And again, street crime did the same thing.
Yeah.
They would dress up in different garb. They would dress up in religious garb. They would dress up, in different ethnicities. They'd go into neighborhoods to blend in, and they would overhear, they'd listen, they'd watch, and they were very effective. They took a lot of guns, saved a lot of lives.
Yeah, no, for sure. Our mutual, like I said, a couple of our mutual friends, I mentioned Bill Ryan, and of course, Duty Ron Liccardi, who was in street crime for a while. His partner was Officer Kevin Gillespie, who sadly was killed in the line of duty in 1996. So you get your gold shield during your time in the housing police.
Yeah.
And now you're a detective. And so now you're working homicides and of course, within the projects, of course, there's a lot of good people within the projects, which I'm sure you came across in your tenure there. But unfortunately, there's some bad people, some of them involved in the trafficking of narcotics, firearms, they're robbers, they're rapists, whatever the case may be. They're just not good people and they're ruining it for everybody else. So getting your detective's shield, which I'm sure was a proud moment for you. Where was the command? Did you go straight to homicide, or was there another unit you were assigned to originally?
No.
Okay, so take me
through. I went into the Detective Bureau, again, having worked my entire career prior on the streets of mostly East Harlem. As I told you, my training officer, who was my mentor, he was a sergeant, and at the time, and he and I both went into the Detective Bureau at the same time. And he was given the assignment of PSA 7 Detective Squad in the Bronx, the South Bronx, which covers mostly the 4-0 and the 4-2, the 4-8. And again, the 4-0 and the 4-2 are 85% project area. And he wanted me with him. So he took me there. And again, I knew how to get to Yankee Stadium. That's all I knew about the Bronx, basically. And I had a great partner, a woman by the name of Teresa Jones, who was my first real partner in the Detective Bureau. And the funny thing about it was, I was so jealous of her, because in the summertime she could wear nice, flowing skirts and blouses and everything, and I'm in a suit and tie, And the other thing was, the old days, the cars didn't have bucket seats; they were bench seats. So she was 5 foot tall, so I had to drive all the time. So otherwise, my feet would be in the glove compartment. So because the seat moved as one, all the way back. Right. So I'm 6'2", she's 5'2", whatever, and I had to drive. And again, I'm not that familiar with the Bronx, so it was always Wagner right, Wagner go left, Wagner go right, 2 blocks up, Wagner go right. Because you have to learn the area in which you work.
Right, makes sense.
And she taught me quick. And again, I was only familiar with the Manhattan court system. I had to learn a whole new system in the Bronx, what DAs to trust, who not to trust, who to go to, for certain things. And you do these things, you learn. And the beauty of housing was, we didn't have, in NYPD, you have so many branches in the Detective Bureau, missing persons unit, sex crimes, or now it's called Special Victims Unit. You have the homicide squads. Yes, we had a homicide major case squad in housing, which I ended up in prior to the merge. But that being said, in the housing detective squads, you handled everything. Anything that came across your desk. Could be a burglary, could be a robbery, could be a child abuse case, a domestic case, sex abuse, a sex crime, a rape, homicide, a missing person, DOA. You handled everything. There was no unit to refer it to. You handled it. So you ran the gamut of investigations. So you got a taste of everything, of how to do everything. And I latched on to the old timers. I respected them, and I watched them and listened to what they had to say. And, you know, every chance that they bring in an arrest, and I could watch their interview skills, the things they, even though I went to courses, you know, I took every course that was ever up for taking, because I figured, you know, it could be there were some courses I took in my career that I literally had to sit there like this to keep my eyes open, and not to fall asleep. But
it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to have it under your belt.
Even if you glean one thing from that course that comes across your desk in your career that you could attribute to that course, it was worth it. If it helps you solve a case, you know. Mm-hmm. And so I took every course that I could attend. And with that being said, but the real learning took place in the street, working with these more experienced detectives, watching their style, watching how they work. And again, that goes back to my anti-crime days, because what used to happen was, and I did this as a detective as well. The career path was generally from anti-crime, your next aspiration was to go into the detective bureau. So you got eager guys that are eager to make arrests, guys that are eager to learn, because they want to be where you are, as I did when I was in plainclothes. I wanted to be where they were. Mm-hmm. So I made it a purpose to mingle with the detectives anytime I could, you know, and they began to trust me. I would go to them for advice, to ask them certain things. And what would happen was, let's say a guy's partner would go on vacation for a week. So now he's by himself. So he would go to the captain of the command and say, can I get a guy from anti-crime? They used to call it on a steal. Can I borrow one of your anti-crime cops?
So would you mind?
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Can I borrow one of your anti-crime cops? Because I need a body with me when I go out on my cases.
Yes.
You know, you can't go out by yourself. So, you know, and basically you had to now clean up your act, because, you know, you're dressed for the street all the time. You have to, you know, get into a suit and tie and cut your hair and look the part, you know, if you can. Right. And that's when you learned, because you kept your mouth shut and your eyes open. You were basically there to watch his back, but you learned and absorbed, acted like a sponge. You absorbed everything he did or she did, and saw techniques. And these guys, they're the ones who taught me how to dress, how to act, how to listen to people, how to talk to people, how to gain people's confidence, just by observing them. You know, certain little things that you might think are inconsequential are very important as a detective, because detectives have a mystique, and that mystique is brought on by the media, as well as television, movies. Come on, they don't make many cop movies about captains. They make cop movies about who?
Detectives.
Exactly.
Homicide, and even TV. You mentioned TV, Homicide, Life on the Street, not to cut you off, Law and Order. I mean,
go back to the movies, Serpico.
Yeah.
You know, go back, you know, French Connection. Yeah. You know, all the detectives. And again, you know, you learn to have shine shoes. You learned that your belt matched your shoes. You learned to carry a good pen. You know, wear a decent watch. Okay. If you had business cards, try to carry them in a card case as opposed to just in your pockets where you hand them out. So sometimes you have to grab extra cards and have them in your pockets. But it looks more professional. If I'm going to hand you my business card, I'm going to reach in my pocket and open my card case and hand you a card. Now, of course, a card case may be old, half a dozen cards. So you fill it up constantly. But it keeps that mystique of the detective. That's why detectives wear business attire. You know? Because that's the tradition of the trench coats, for instance. And I wore a trench coat, you know? That was something that was instilled in me. That old-time detective attitude. But look, you have to walk the walk, talk the talk. You have to, you know, have a reputation of being honest and fair with individuals, you know,
Mm-hmm.
but yet by no means are you a pushover. And again, I learned this, you know, at the feet of detectives when I was in plain clothes, who would, let's say they borrow me for a week, and then they take my partner for the next week while their partner was on vacation. So we all got a taste, you know. And then again, when I went into the detective bureau, that I found it fascinating. The work was fascinating to me. I loved
Detectives
the solving of a case.
Sorry, detectives who obviously wear suits a lot nicer than mine. You know, this
You'd
will
be
get
surprised.
me back.
You'd be surprised.
Maybe I might be. Maybe that's a good
No,
suit
because
after all.
I'll be honest with you, I had suits that I wore to work, and then I had suits that I wore for court.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because again, or suits that I wore if I had to go to a wedding or you know, an affair. Because
Right.
if you're dressed up every day, it's almost like your uniform. It becomes like your uniform. So you want to be able to do some separation, you know, when you go into a special event. You know, I'm not saying walking in a tuxedo, but you understand what
No,
I'm
of
saying.
course, yeah. You gotta kind of separate. Like I don't wear a suit every podcast. You know, I anytime I'm doing interviews of this caliber, I'll rock one.
From you.
Well,
I wish I was wearing one as well.
It's fine. It's fine. But like if I'm doing more of like a laid back episode, like a sports themed episode, I won't wear something like this. I mean, I'll rock up one of my jerseys or something like that. You kind of same thing. You differentiate. So that being said, I do want to ask you this. You know, cops have a lot of close calls. So do firemen. But cops, you know, you never know what kind of situation is waiting on you. I mean, of the faces I showed earlier of some of the housing cops killed in line of duty, the story that sticks out to me is that of Officer Anthony McLean, who was killed in line of duty in 1988. I mean, he's looking for a missing girl, him and his partner. They opened up an elevator looking for the girl, and they stumble upon a drug deal instead. Gunfire erupts, and he's hit and he's killed. So what are the situations when you look back, particularly during the housing years, and we'll get to your NYPD years in a second, that you look back on and you say to yourself, I'm glad that I made it out of that one in one piece?
Well, you know, looking back on it, I try not to dwell on that at all.
Understandable.
There were times when I often wondered why I didn't get hurt after it happened.
Mm-hmm.
But it happened so quick, and even though time seems to slow down during it, and your senses get heightened, but you fall back on your training and hope that it kicks in, and it always did for me, and I was able to come out on the winning end. Yeah, I got hurt. I got stabbed in the hand, you know, by an emotionally disturbed individual with a screwdriver. I got cut across my back with a box cutter during a family dispute. I mean, yeah, I had broken hands, you know, what they call that fighter's fracture,
Mm-hmm.
you know, a couple of times because you had to do battle. I mean, it was your life. See, I was taught, again, going back to my field training, it's a street fight until those cuffs go on. Once those cuffs go on, that's it. Fight's over. But until those cuffs go on, I'll hit you with a garbage can. I don't care. I'll bite your ear off. I'll do a Mike Tyson on you. I don't care. I have to survive.
You're an ECW,
you know? Fighting me. You want to keep fighting me? I'm going to fight.
Yeah.
I'm going to fight for my life. You know? I mean, one incident that really sticks out was early on in my career with my field training officer, actually. We responded on a call for an emotionally disturbed person, what they call an EDP. The mother called. The son he was already had psychological problems, but he was smoking angel dust, PCP.
That's good.
Compounded it. So we come into that, you know, we get to the location. We had already called for backup. We knew a car was coming to back us up, but we were right opposite the building when the call hit. So we were right there. And the door opens, and there's this, he could not have been more than 5'4" and maybe 140 pounds soaking wet. But if I tell you the strength that this guy had, and when the apartment door opened, he's standing there shirtless with his arms over his head, holding a dining room chair. And my FTO quickly closed the door, and the chair goes smashing into the back of the door.
That's what we call crackhead energy.
Well, there's other
Nowadays.
words. I'm not going to use it. It's not politically correct anymore. What
Yeah.
we used to call it, but we then go in the apartment, and the apartment, it was a rather big apartment, actually. It was like a 3-bedroom. And it looked like a war took place in that apartment, because I guess the parents were trying to contain him this whole time. And I rode this guy. And again, I was at my fighting weight, because I played semi-pro football. I was 6'2", a solid 240. Okay?
Yeah, you're a
this
big guy.
Carried me around on his back like I was nothing. Okay?
Like you were me.
And suddenly your hat's over there, your nightstick's over there, your radio is over there. And the radios we carried at the time, we called them bricks, because they were literally this long and this thick. And you could do a lot of damage with one of those radios. And believe me, when you're in a fight like that, I don't care what you hit them with. Anything to get them down.
Of course, yeah.
Because I'm not going to stand there and box with you. I'm not a boxer.
You don't want to
I played football. I'm going to take you down to the ground, and control you, because that's the best way. Because you could be armed. I don't know. You could have a knife. You could have a gun, whatever. But if I get you down on the ground, and my weight is on you, you can't reach. So now we can wait, we can calm it down, and we can control the situation, See, of course, now they employed the diaphragm law. So I don't know how anybody can literally take someone, it's basically like, excuse me, sir, can I arrest you? Oh, no? Okay. Have a nice day. Because, it's no longer, reasonable amount of force to use for resisting arrest. And again, we're not trying to arrest this guy. We're trying to contain him so he can be brought to the hospital. And I mean, we went, again, I rode his back through the kitchen, into the living room, into the dining area, through a china closet, and then my partner was trying to grab his legs. My training officer was trying to grab his legs to take him down. And he's like a greased pig. He's sweating profusely. So he's like a greased pig. And we're trying to contain him. Can't hold him, can't grab him, can't grab an arm. He's flying all over the place. He put 2 hands on the butt of my partner's gun in the holster.
Oh, wow.
And he started pulling. And I could literally see remember, we were carrying, 38 caliber revolvers, 6-shot revolvers.
Yeah, it's before Smith & Wessons.
And
9mm.
And you could see the holster, the leather, start to separate from the lacing. I mean, this is how strong this guy was. And when I saw that, I just started to wail on him as hard as I could, because you're trying to restrain him, but you're not trying to hurt him, because he's not doing it intentionally to hurt you. He's out of his mind.
Yeah.
And he's drugged up. He's off his meds and he's drugged up. And of course, you got the parents in the mix too. Don't hurt my son. Oh, you call now, don't hurt my son. So now I got to fend mom off with one hand too, because mom wants to stop me from hurting the son.
That's her baby.
Again. So at that point, the cavalry, it seemed like forever. And it was only a matter of 6 minutes, maybe at the most.
Mm-hmm.
Cavalry comes through the door. He's quickly subdued. He's cuffed up. And my hand is like, the old cartoons when you see it going, whoop, 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 my hand is swelling up, like it looked like a catcher's mitt on my right hand. And this old time cop says to me, come here, son. He says, you got a nightstick? At the time, we also carried what we call blackjacks or slappers. They were leather-covered lead weapons that you carried. There was a pocket called, actually a jack pocket in your uniform pants below your back pocket. It was along the back of your thigh. And in there was, this weapon, a handheld, you know, it was like a slapper was called. It was a large piece of lead covered with leather that you could use. And let me tell you, you do a lot of damage with it.
Yeah, I imagine.
And they're illegal. They're illegal now. They were out, you know, while on patrol, they were banned. While I was on patrol, they were banned. They were used for years. And they're a big favorite amongst criminals because, again, you hit a guy in the temple, he goes right down.
Yeah, you can incapacitate.
The guy's nose, one shot real quick.
Yeah.
And they're concealable, easily concealable. But that being said, he says, you have your nightstick, you have your radio, you got your jack, meaning your blackjack. He says, don't ever hit a guy in the head with your hand. Let that be a lesson to you. He goes, hit him with anything else. Grab a chair leg. Don't hit him with your hand. And he just walked away. And I was out for like 6 weeks. You know? This is
like career. I grew up watching wrestling. This is like literally every Hell in a Cell match I ever watched. Like this is like Undertaker versus Mankind.
And you know, and you know, the adrenaline is pumping so, you know, because you go from 0 to 60.
Yeah, you could have died.
Seconds flat. And suddenly you're at war. You're fighting for your life. And again, you know, the parents, you know, you have to understand the situation too. The parents, that's their son. At the end of the day, even though he's wrecked the whole apartment and the father's bleeding and from the head, you know, from trying to contain him and this and that, they're still his kid. And they don't want him hurt. You know, that's how I ended up getting hurt in a domestic incident. The woman calls the police to come because the husband's beating on her. We show up, we separate the two. He starts to put up a bit of a struggle. So he has to, you know, we have to get a little forceful with him to restrain him, to handcuff him. She comes out, don't touch my husband, comes out with a box cutter. Whoop. Right. I had no idea I was even cut. I thought I was sweating. I thought I was perspiring until someone said, oh, the S word. I'm not going to curse in this show.
Thank you.
She said, we gotta call an ambulance. I said, what are you talking about? You're bleeding. And I could see my uniform shirt slowly filling up, absorbing the blood.
God.
But I didn't feel any pain because it was like, you know, just like a scalpel.
I would have passed out.
No, I got lightheaded, I got to admit. And the whole thing was, you know, they rushed me to the hospital and I had to get the tetanus shot and the whole bit, you know, but they couldn't even stitch it. They had to butterfly it, you know, and it's amazing. I never had a real scar. The only time you could see it, and it's a good 12-inch gash. The only time you could see it is if I get really tan on my back, you will see a fine white line.
Okay.
You know, if they're all, you know, but even when I got the house, it was such a fine cut, it didn't hurt. And also, get your adrenaline.
Right, yeah.
It hurt the next day when, you know, I was trying to lay down and I couldn't, you know, I couldn't lay on my back for like a week, you know.
Yeah, your stomach. So let's move it. I said we would talk about the merger, you know, and that happened, as I said it earlier, as we talked about earlier, in 1995. And I read this, you know, during this pandemic, we're doing a lot of reading. I remember last summer, you know, one of the books that was dusted off from the garage I just got was Mayor Giuliani's book, which is called Leadership, which came out in 2002, back when he still had his marbles together, and we'll leave it at that. And, you know, it's actually a pretty good book. But he gets to that point where he's talking about the merger and he's saying, well, I wanted to do it for years. And so I called to the unions and the unions bluffed and I played hardball with the unions and I won out. And so in May of 95, it's completed. I think transit went in April.
Well, let me explain to you.
Yeah, well, go ahead. Take the floor. I'll give you the floor.
I had an experience prior to the merge. 2 years prior to the merge. There was no merge in sight. Okay? There was always what the Navy calls scuttlebutt or gossip about a merge occurring. I mean, I heard those rumors since I basically came on the job, you know, that they were going to make one police department. There was always some talk about it, but we never thought it would happen. Never. Neither did any of the guys I knew in transit think it would happen. Make a long story short, I was very good friends, and I am still today, with John Miller, who was the Deputy Commissioner of Counterterrorism with the NYPD. I always had very good friends in the press. I was very lucky. And John Miller was a reporter for Channel 4, NBC News Local in New York City at the time when I was in plain clothes. And we crossed paths on a couple of occasions at various crime scenes. And as a matter of fact, John Miller, you recall, if you look at any of the documentaries involving John Gotti and his trials, John Miller was the only reporter that could stick a microphone in John Gotti's face and he would talk to him. It's an amazing thing. John Miller's father was an old-time reporter, you know, with the press card in the hat, like you see in the 1930s movies. So John Miller grew up at his father's foot, you know, learning the trade, plying the trade. He was a good reporter, knew how to get information.
He was on Nightly News with Peter Jennings for many years.
And to his credit, he's the only Westerner that ever interviewed Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, 1998, I believe.
Yeah, he wrote a book on it. I mean, really good reporter.
Oh, one of the best.
And I got to admit, and he'll admit too, huge cop buff. I mean, he would come around and he had an old, you know, police car that he had bought. It had all the antennas on it. It was all blacked out windows. He had the scanners so he could listen to the police radios and all the different divisions so he could respond to like jobs in progress to get the story, to get the scoop on the story. So sometimes he would come around and he'd do ride-arounds with us. He had his own bulletproof vest. He even had a carry permit. You know, he had his own bulletproof vest, and we were like, "Can we use your car? Because your car's a lot nicer than the crap we got." You know, and you know, we were joking, but he would do like unofficial ride-arounds with us. You know, to see the street, to see how the street worked. You know, and we would point things out to him and show him. You see that guy there? He just did a hand-to-hand sale. What do you mean? I didn't see it. Watch closely. Watch the next guy that comes up. Observe his hands. See where.
Hey, what's up, bro? And there's the right there. Yep.
It's like magic. It's like sleight of hand. These guys, some of these guys they were so good, and they would, you know, and you'd have one guy who'd signal, another guy who would get the money. You'd have one guy was the money man. You didn't want the dealer to have the money because if he gets popped, then they lose the money too. Right. Then if they lose the product. So you had where the stash was. You had someone protecting the stash because you didn't want to get caught with, you know, a certain amount on you. You wanted to only get caught with misdemeanor weight.
Yeah.
You'd maybe have 1 or 2 bags of either heroin or coke or angel dust, whatever you were selling. Yeah. So it would be misdemeanor weight. But meanwhile, there's felony weight within 10 feet of you, you know, that you keep re-upping from, going back to. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you have this little group and they do things with hand signals and just glances and, you know, and you learn, you know, we taught him what to look for and how to see it. And I even eventually did a little documentary he did on it, you know, where they filmed and showed how these guys did stuff. But with that being said, he had just signed a big contract with NBC, you know, and where he was going to go national. And Bratton became the police commissioner in his first go-round.
1994.
Bratton was chief of transit. He came from Boston, but he was the chief of transit. And like I mentioned before, the late Jack Maple, who was a genius, eccentric guy, very eccentric, lived way above his means.
Flashy dresser.
A genius.
Yes.
And Bratton took Maple with him right to One Police Plaza and grabbed John Miller as his DCPI, which is the Deputy Commissioner of Public Information, which is basically the NYPD's news bureau. They're the ones who put out, you know.
I dealt with them. That's when I was trying to get Jimmy O'Neill on the show. Right. They were very good to me. I give them
they are. They're pretty cool. DCPI is pretty cool. Mm-hmm. Now, again, I called John up jokingly, and I said to him, "Hey, listen, if you ever need a driver, you know, give me a call." You know, just kidding around, basically congratulating him, even though he took a huge pay cut to do it. You know, he did it. Well, make a long story, I get a call about 3-4 weeks later to come to One Police Plaza with my partner at the time to go up to the police commissioner's office. Now I'm in housing. At this time, I'm in the housing homicide major case squad that covered Manhattan and the Bronx. And my partner and I, a fine detective by the name of Frank Diaz, one of the best detectives ever walk the earth. Frank and I get called down to meet with the police commissioner. And we're looking at each other, and I said, oh, it must have been Miller. So, of course, we get there, and we're met. They let us park in the garage, which is like a huge no-no, in police plaza, because a lot of police cars get towed, believe it or not, because, it's the only police headquarters in the country that police cars can't park in front of. But that being said, we were told to go into the garage. There was a spot waiting for us. We were escorted to the police commissioner's private elevator, went up to the 14th floor, doors open, there's John Miller. Gives me a hug. He knew my partner. We're going to lunch. Okay. So there's a cafe right around the back of police headquarters. And we went there. And it was myself, my partner. Commissioner Bratton had already been there. It was basically just an introduction. And he left quickly. So it was myself, my partner, Jack Maple, who I actually knew, ironically, because my sister had dated a transit cop who worked for Jack. And we used to see one another in court a lot. And he heard my name called one day for a case. He said, do you have a sister named? And I said, yeah. I said, you're? And he says, yeah. And we kind of shook hands and, became friends. And I met Jack Maple that way because he came down to check on his boys, in court.
Okay.
He introduced me. So I knew, he knew of me and I knew of him. And my sister knew him because she would go to the transit parties and stuff. So she knew
see him.
Well.
You run in the same circles.
Yeah. So we're at lunch and Maple is just firing questions at us, picking our brains on how we work our homicides because we have to work in conjunction with the NYPD. And all the investigations would be worked out of the local NYPD precinct of occurrence because housing didn't have the facilities, to have, a separate detective squad. And we had them, but we didn't have the room, that NYPD had where the detectives had the whole second floor or whatever, things like that. We didn't have those kind of facilities at the time. Not until right before the merge did we get actual new buildings made for us.
Too little, too late, though.
It's very, very depressing. But that being said, all the homicides were run out of the precincts. And we, again, like I told you before, we were blessed that we had great rapport. I had great rapport with the NYPD, my NYPD counterparts, because they loved when there was a housing homicide, because we came with manpower. We had the local precinct detective squad come. There's at least 4 detectives showing up. Then you had the unit I was in, which was the major case squad, which you had a minimum of 2 to 3 detectives coming and a boss. Plus you had, the 4 detectives that might be working that night at the precinct and their boss. And then the borough, whether it was the Bronx or Manhattan North Homicide, Manhattan South, you had that squad coming in. So now you have a mini task force of detectives. You've got maybe 20, 25 detectives and supervisors together. And the solvability factor now for the homicide goes straight through the roof because it's a proven fact that the more manpower and resources you have when a crime occurs, the solvability rate goes up. It quadruples, because you can cover more area. You can canvass buildings. You can look for witnesses, look for cameras, look for evidence. You have so much manpower and resources, and then you come together and you have all guys bouncing ideas. Yeah, well, I found this guy, and I found this guy, and we found this guy, and now you start putting things together. And another thing was, in those days, again, when you look at it today, it's so antiquated. We had photo books. But housing had their photo books of perpetrators arranged in project order, okay? And people are basically creatures of habit. So if they committed a crime in a specific project, they were likely to do it again or in the adjacent one. So our photos were different than the NYPD photos, which would just be via description. Like, let's say male Hispanics between the ages of 19 and 20. And then another book, you'd have male Hispanic blacks between 19 and 20. So their books were arranged differently. Where our books, if we had a homicide in, let's say, Webster houses in the 4-2 in the Bronx, which was a pretty big project, we could pull out the Webster book and bring it and have the victim look through it and say, oh, there he is. And it was quite a system. The other thing that we had to our advantage was if we had a perpetrator that we were looking at or a person of interest that we were looking at that resided in the projects, housing kept great records back in the day, great records. Every tenant had a folder, and that folder went back. They never took anything out of those folders. And some of these apartments had been handed down from grandma to granddaughter to great-granddaughter and so on. So the apartment stayed in the family because they were on the lease. They were able to keep the apartment in the family. You didn't want to give up a project apartment if they were hard to come by. So, you would find next of kin, and it had social security numbers, and it was legal for us to look at it because we worked for the housing authority, and these were housing authority records.
Right.
You see? So it was a wealth of information because you'd show next to kin. And, oh, there's grandma who lives in, somewhere in North Carolina. Okay, well, that's a place to look for, Sonny Boy, because maybe that's where he went to go see grandma after he did the shooting. So you'd call up, the sheriff's department or whatever of this little town in North Carolina, and you overnight them a little package with the guy's photo and description, whatever. And more than likely, he knew grandma because these are small towns.
Right.
And you'd get a call back. Yeah, he's here. Come on, get him. And you'd come down there. You'd fly down there or drive down there, and the guy'd be in custody. They'd have him for you 90% of the time. And we were able to gather this intel. It was fantastic. And also housing got we were partially federally funded. So, we got federal monies through HUD, Housing Urban Development.
Yeah.
And because we had a lot of HUD properties that we protected also that were run by NYCHA. So with federal monies, if you don't use it, you lose it.
Right.
So
got to put it to good use.
We got a lot of equipment that was state of the art that NYPD did not have. We were the first ones to have what they called ballistic sensors, where it was like a telescope with a rifle sight on it, and it had a beam that came out, a laser beam that came out of both sides. So you would line it up, because we used to get a lot of shots fired through windows accidentally. They fire shots in the street or go through a window, hit somebody. It happens a lot in the project.
Fortunately.
Unfortunately, too often. And we would have these ballistic lasers, and we were all trained in them, certified in them, and you would basically place this device on a tripod, look like a child's telescope, and you would place it between the bullet hole. You would aim one laser beam through the center of the bullet hole in the window, and let's say there was what they call a BIM, which is a ballistic impact mark, on the opposite wall. See where the bullet traveled through the apartment. And you'd aim the other one at the BIM on the wall. And wherever that laser beam went, let's say it was bouncing around on a window a block away, you could get a warrant based on that to go get that gun.
And it's amazing. I mean, this mind you, this is like pre the technology. I mean, internet's around, but this is detective work.
Every detective squad got unbelievable photographic equipment. Night vision, when it first came out, we got, and this was all federal monies. And as a matter of fact, that's when, in the latter stages of housing, we had a bike unit. We had a great unit, an elevator vandalism unit, because, we ended up taking down a lot of contractors because they contract all their elevator work out, and these guys would come in and they'd sabotage the elevators, especially on a Friday night. So Saturday morning they'd get a call from home, and they live out in the island, let's say, and their time starts from the time they get their call, and they'd come into the city, go up to the elevator room and just plug the fuse back in that they took out the night before, and the elevators start working again, and they get paid until they get home again. And this, so this, and plus we used to have, the kids used to do this stuff called surfing, elevator surfing, where they ride on the top of the elevators and jump across. It's lunacy. I don't know how these kids did it. And too many kids got killed, crushed.
It's stupid. Yeah, it's horrible.
And also, there were a lot of robberies that went on within elevators. So this unit, this elevator vandalism unit, was trained in all sorts of elevator mechanics. And then they got further training in the installation of cameras, and they put pinhole cameras in certain elevators way before. Now it's commonplace. Every elevator you go in has a camera.
Yeah.
Because there was a robbery pattern of elevator robberies. So they put some cameras around, and they were quite good. We had a graffiti unit, that learned how to read graffiti. We ended up having a narcotic unit, and we even had our own emergency service unit in housing towards the end.
I found out about that because John Coughlin, who sadly was killed on 9/11.
Yeah, he was a sergeant.
He was a sergeant housing ESU.
Yeah, and he got killed 9/11. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were all rolled right into ESU at the merge because they had the training. They were all trained.
Yeah.
They were all trained. But their trucks, our trucks, were newer than their trucks. So they scooped our trucks up quick.
Yeah.
But that being said, we had all our equipment just disappeared. All the equipment we had disappeared, and it went. And it's funny, when I went into the the NYPD squads, the squads didn't have that equipment. Only TARU, which is the Technical Assistance Response Unit, had that equipment. So all of the equipment that was available to every single detective to use, or every single detective supervisor to use on a given case, well, you didn't have to call in another unit to help you out with, now was given to, it was taken away from the detectives. So that was another, but see, again, with the merge, transit went willingly. So pretty much their guys went laterally. If you were in the transit robbery squad, odds are you landed in, one of NYPD's robbery squads. If you were in the transit major case unit, you went into, the NYPD's major case unit.
The seamless transition.
Yeah, pretty much, a lateral transfer.
Right.
Housing fought the merge. We fought it to the bitter end. We had court injunctions. We tried everything possible.
Giuliani talked about that.
Yeah.
In his book.
Our PVA president at the time, Tony Nichols, he did his best. He really did, to keep us together. And Giuliani was just wanted what he wanted, and he got what he wanted. And what happened was, it became a hostile takeover of us. We weren't happy about this at all. Again, we had just started getting new precincts built. Again, that was federal money that was allotted to us years before, but they had to be designed, and everything. And, my unit came, from basically, we used to call it the Bat Cave. It was a little clandestine location in the first floor of a single project building in Spanish Harlem that had a sign about this big that said, Manhattan Bronx Homicide Major Case Squad. That, if you weren't looking for it, you couldn't see it.
Yeah, couldn't spot it.
It was just a gray door. It was just a gray door. And we had a parking lot in the back, and no one knew we were there. And that's where we operated out. And we ended up moving to the brand new PSA 7 in the South Bronx, where we had a luxurious office. There were elevators, the lockers were, everything state of the art, and we lost it. We were on such a high, It was worth traveling to the Bronx every day from Brooklyn, just because I knew my office was air conditioned, it was clean, it was, it was new, it was a pleasure to work in. We had interview rooms, we had real cells, we had, everything that we needed at our disposal.
Right when you guys were hitting your stride as a police department.
And then suddenly it was yanked. And we were also, other than a select few, a lot of bosses made out okay. You know, they went pretty much laterally because the NYPD needed them. You know, because they were, you know, they were the brass of the housing police, so they needed them and their experience. But we, on the other hand, were pretty much cast to the winds. We were just stuck wherever they wanted to stick us. So here I gained prominence in my career, and now suddenly I'm 3 steps back in a detective squad. I'm not a specialist anymore. Now I'm just back in a detective squad, catching petty larceny cases and, you know, grand larceny cases, missing persons and DOAs and stuff like that. And I kind of went on strike for a while, to be honest with you. I'd help the other guys out on their stuff, but I didn't do anything until one day a shooting took place, and suddenly got my juices flowing, and I got into it, and within 48 hours, me and another detective were in Litchfield, Connecticut, grabbing the perp. And the boss couldn't believe it. He's like, "You haven't done much in 3 months." And now suddenly, you know, you came alive, and in 48 hours, this guy was shot 10 times. He was likely to die. I mean, I don't know how, he's still walking around. God bless him. This guy's still walking
around. Good for him. Good, good.
He was shot 10 times, 3 of them were in the head. And he was up and talking. He was up and talking in the recovery room. Okay? And I remember,
that's a story to tell.
I had worked like 17 hours straight, 18 hours straight, and I came up to see him in the recovery room. The nurse comes up to me and says, "You know, not for nothing, detective, you look worse than him." He was talking, he wanted food, and meanwhile, he's bandaged all over. He's got like 4 IVs in him, and, you know, and he's like nothing. He was a big strapping guy. He was just very incredibly lucky. But he knew who did it. He wasn't afraid to tell. And we got him ID'd right away. And with a little footwork, you know, hitting the streets, we found out the guy fled to Litchfield, of all places, Litchfield, Connecticut. Whoopi Goldberg has a house in Litchfield. Okay? It's pretty ritzy up there.
It is.
There's only one detective, shield number 1. And he went out with us, and we took, you know, we got a couple of state police to come with us, you know, and we grabbed the guy like right away. Because, you know, it was just a very funny thing that of all places to go, that's where this guy ended up.
And the perp was Dominican, because you talking to me about that case. I'm thinking to myself, you're because I say this as a Dominican, you would be better off coming to Bridgeport or coming down here because you blend right in. Like, you know, here it's just like Hispanic central.
As I recall, he had a girlfriend or a cousin that was a domestic worker in one of the, you know, the mansions over there. So she had a little, you know, apartment, you know, almost like a trailer. You know, it was similar to a trailer. and you know, but she had a good job. You know, she made good money. She, you know, was able to support her family, and that's where he went running to. And I mean, I never would have thought in my wildest dreams that that's where I would have found him. But that's all it took. And then the juices started flowing again. And my partner, like I said, mentioned before, Tom Lombardo, he ended up, again, coming from a specialized unit into the 28th precinct. I went to the 3-0, he went to the 2-8. And he wasn't too happy about it either, even though, you know, we knew guys in it. At least we knew some detectives in the 2-8. I knew no one where I went. There was one housing building in the whole confines of the 3-0 precinct, and it was a senior citizen building, that the only thing would happen in that building is people would die. That's it. Otherwise, there wasn't even graffiti on it. You would never know, you know? And
pretty much all that occurred, unfortunately. Yeah.
So I put in a transfer. I talked to him. I said, well, what are we going to do? You know, we got to do something. We got to hook up somehow. So we both agreed, let's try to get into the 2-3. That's where we started. We started in Spanish Harlem. We still got connections there. You know, we still know the streets there. let's see if we can get this. So I put in transfer papers. He put in transfer papers. And much to the chagrin of some of the other detectives in the 3-0 squad who had transfer papers in for quite a long time that weren't acknowledged, ours went through. And I to this day, I don't know if someone pulled a string for me or had some feelings. I don't know. But I got transferred to the 2-3, and it was like coming home because I knew everyone in the squad, you know, from having worked with them, you know, for all those years. And I felt right at home. They welcomed me with open arms. And it was, you know, again, I'm back in the barrio. You know, it's home. It's my, you know, my youth. It's where I am. I have people I know. I can catch a case and I can go right out and talk to them, and I know who to ask. You know, I know where all the addresses are. I don't, you know what I mean?
It's easier. And we're talking with Scott Wagner here, the Mike Name podcast. This might be the longest. I'm not complaining. I'm having a great time. This might be one of the longest, if not the longest podcast I've done. So this is definitely going to be split up into separate parts because I want the audience to savor this fully. And this is like the time has been flying by. I don't even realize it. You know, so a few more things. I don't want to keep you too long because I know you got a family and I don't want to keep you from them. But I do want to hit on these things, which is 3 things. Hostage negotiation.
Yes.
We'll get to Ahron Kee, which is the most infamous case of your career, a little later. And obviously your work in the PI sector guarding some, and in the dignitary protection unit as well, guarding some interesting folks. But first, hostage negotiation, which was, of course, you were a part of this unit, one of the most elite units in the NYPD. I believe you're wearing the shirt of hostage negotiation.
Yes.
So being in a unit like that,
our logo.
How'd you get there? And what are some of the more jarring memories you have of being in such a great unit, one of the best in the world?
Well, again, not to brag, it is the NYPD hostage negotiation team is the first of its kind in the world, and it is the best in the world. We teach other police agencies across the world, you know, our former negotiators, and we've even taught military in Guantanamo Bay, all right, how to diffuse situations, okay? The criteria was, at the time, you had to be recommended by a negotiator. Now, I had been, you know, just as a detective, I had responded to, you know, jumpers or, you know, attempted suicides and suicides, successful suicides, you know.
Unfortunately.
And yeah, that's the logo that's on my shirt, actually, where it says, "Talk to me." That's our logo.
Yes.
And we, you know, I had talked to, I was never afraid to talk to someone, you know. And one night, this is a weird thing. I had my application in. You know, there was a negotiator named Tony Vasquez who worked Manhattan North Homicide, another great detective, he was in hostage negotiation. And again, housing, we weren't allowed in the unit at the time, you know?
Right.
He tried, and you would think housing had a lot of jumpers. A lot of people, you know, went off housing rooftops, you know, or tried. You know, there was quite a lot of jobs. That's where I got my taste of, you know, talking to a victim. You know, my first successful attempt at it was to get a guy down, you know, off a roof, because I was one of the first on the scene and talk the guy off. It was no big deal. It was just talking to someone, empathizing. Natural. It came naturally to me. So again, Tony Vasquez put me in. He recommended me. I don't hear anything. Time goes by. My partner and I happen to be working alone one hot summer night, and we get notified from the desk. We were just going out to grab a bite. We get notified by the desk that there's a barricaded individual in a park house in the middle of a small playground on 108th Street off of 3rd Avenue. And they're afraid because in that park house, there was propane cans and gasoline for the lawnmowers and stuff. It was used almost as a central storing for all the parks in the area, where they would, you know, gas up the lawnmowers and the, you know, the trimmers and all that stuff. And they had propane for whatever they used it for, whatever tools. So apparently this guy had barricaded in there and he was smoking crack. So they had evacuated an area around. Helicopter was hovering with the lights, and emergency services surrounded the place. And we told the sergeant at the desk, okay, thank you. And we went to eat because that's not our job. We're not negotiators. You know, it's not our job to go. Now, if he blows the place up, if he kills somebody, now it's our job to go over there. You know? But right now, that's emergency services job and the hostage team's job. Has nothing to do with other detectives. So we go to eat. Now we come back about 40 minutes later, and we see it's still going on. So me being, you know, a little nosy, I said to my partner, come on, let's take a walk over there and see. And he's begging me, come on, no, we don't need to get involved. No. I said, listen, come on, let's just go. So we walk over. It was a few blocks from the precinct. It was a nice night. So we walked.
Yeah.
Take a car.
Why
we
not?
We used to do that. And used to, just on a side note, we used to bug the people out in the neighborhood sometimes. You'd see 4 detectives just walking down the street because one of the guys smoked cigars and he wouldn't, you know, smoke in the office. So he would like to smoke a cigar every now and then. We'd take a little walk. And people would see detectives just walking down the street, and they were, well, what happened? Nothing happened.
Just walking.
We're just walking. You know, he's smoking a cigar. We're walking and talking, saying hello to people. You know, and again, community policing.
Right.
And so what happens is, we get to the scene. We see what's going on. The head of the hostage team at the time, great lieutenant, Hugh McGowan. He's a doctor now, Dr. Hugh McGowan. He was the commander of the hostage team at the time. He sees obviously with detectives, you know, we had our shields out and everything so we could get through the line, you know, the barricade. And he looks at us quizzically because out of almost 6,000 detectives, there's less than 100 negotiators. So he knows everybody that's in the team. And a side note also, it's the only unit within the NYPD that is designated a team. Everything else is a unit, a division, or a bureau. It's the only one that's a team, and it'll never change. Why? Because it's a team effort.
Right.
That's why. It's a total team effort. So that being said, so he says, you're not negotiators, are you? I said, no, boss. I said, but if it'll help, I said, I really had a problem with authority back then. And I said, no, boss, but I've had if it'll help, I had my application in for a couple of years. You know, I said it very sarcastically. He looked at me and said, would you be willing to talk to this guy? I said, sure. I didn't bat an eye. I didn't hesitate. I said, sure. Now, again, TARU, the Technical Assistance Response Unit, they had fiber optics in there and mics, so we could see what the guy was doing. So, you know, we had monitors, TV monitors that were set up. We could see what the guy was doing. So they put the heavy vest on me and everything, and I went in there. And I see the guy, his name was Hector. And I knew him. And apparently, the way I knew him was his buddy. They were can guys. You know, the guys that go around and collect the cans and bottles and turn them in. He was a can guy. Not so much of a druggie, more of a drinker, but a can guy, nevertheless. Which I always kind of gave respect to because they could make a lot more money robbing and stealing. Yet they're walking, you know, the length of Manhattan and the breadth of Manhattan, collecting cans and bottles. That's a work ethic.
It is. I
always kind of had a respect for these guys. You know, I really did. But that being said, I said, Hector. And there was a microphone. He's looking all around because now someone knows his name. I said, it's Wagner. He goes, Wagner? I said, yeah, Wagner for the 2-3. What had happened was a couple of weeks prior, Hector's best friend was murdered in a gang initiation. The Latin Kings were very prevalent back in those days. And one of their initiation rites into the gang was to just beat somebody down for no apparent reason, just to get into the gang. The Bloods had a similar thing where they had to cut somebody. You know, just for no reason. So this poor soul was sitting on a bench, drinking, and a group set upon him and, beat him to death. And my partner and I, collared up on him. We grabbed like 6 kids, 6 guys that were involved in it. And this was his best friend. So he was very distraught about losing his friend. So he went in there basically with a bottle of liquor and some crack, and he was smoking crack and drinking because it was too much for him. And again, he's got a little butane torch, and he's sitting within a foot of a propane tank. This is not healthy.
To say the least.
I said, Hector, what's the matter? Why are you in here? And he told me again, the same story that I just told you. He was despondent over the loss of his friend. Mm-hmm. I said, okay, but this isn't solving anything. He wouldn't want you to do this. So you think you can come out? And he goes, okay. Just like that. Okay. Now, mind you, they've been there for like 4.5 hours trying to communicate with him. And he wouldn't talk to anybody. And they're watching him, walk around in circles like a caged animal, occasionally hitting off the pipe, taking drinks, And I said, will you come out? He said, okay, but will you go with me to the hospital? I said, absolutely. He goes, I want to see your face when I come out. I said, I'll be right at the door. And again, I had no training, and I didn't know if I was saying the right thing or not. But the lieutenant kept tapping me, in other words, letting me know, keep going, you're doing the right thing. I did explain to him, he had the door barricaded with a bunch of furniture and tools and stuff. And I said, listen, you're going to have to take the stuff away from the door piece by piece. I said, first, put that stupid crack pipe down and that lighter. I don't want to see that. I had to get a little, stern with him.
Yeah.
And he did. He very obediently put it down. I said, okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. I said, now, remove the stuff from in front of the door. Now, I'm telling you now, we have to do this my way. It's for your safety and for our safety. Okay? I'm not going to hurt anybody. I said, Hector, I know you're not. But there's a lot of guys out here that don't know you like I do. And they're nervous. So let's keep them safe and keep you safe.
Right.
That's the most important thing. And then there'll be an ambulance here. We'll go right in the ambulance. We'll go right to Metropolitan Hospital. And I'll stay with you. If you promise, I promise. So, the ESU commander, the incident commander on the scene, is telling me what to tell him, how to, unblock the door, to, make sure it's unlocked, to then go away from the door, get on his knees, cross his legs, put his hands behind his head, and the whole bit. So I'm giving him all the instructions so they see on camera that he's compliant. And ESU goes busting in there. They take him down real quick, which you can't blame them because they don't know. They don't know. He could have a gun on him. They don't know. They want to go home too. So, and they've been out there a long time in the heat, in these vests and everything. This heavy equipment is no joke. Those vests weigh 40, 50 pounds.
Yeah.
I'm standing right in the doorway. I'm talking over these guys. Hector, it's Wagner, I'm here like I promised. He's talking to me. He's yelling at me. They cuff him up. They take him out. I took him from them. I said, let me take him. They gave him to me. I walked him over to the ambulance. I put him in the ambulance. I went in the ambulance with him. We rode to Metropolitan Hospital. I stayed there for a few hours with him. Made sure he was situated, expedited it a little so he wouldn't have to wait all night, because they put him on 72-hour observation. They have, they have to clear him medically, and then they have a psych come down to, talk to him. And they ask him, who's the president of the United States? We are, things like that.
Yeah.
They put you in the psych ward for 72 hours. And then they cut you loose. But make a long story short, the lieutenant from the hostage team comes to the emergency room, Hugh McGowan. And he says, can I talk to you for a second? I said, sure. He goes, what's your name? I said, Wagner. He says, you're in the 2-3 squad? I said, yeah. He said, you said you had an application in? I said, a couple of years now. He said, who recommended you? And I told him, Tony Vasquez. He goes, This was like a Thursday evening. He says, "You be in my office Tuesday at 10. I'll send the telephone message." That means, that my CO will get an official notification from,
Okay.
that I'm to appear, in one police box at 10 a.m. on, Monday, whatever date it was. And I was there, nice suit, I made sure I was cleaned up well. And the warmest guy, nicest man. I mean, I tell you, this guy is salt of the earth. He invited me in his office, sat down, we had a little conversation, made small talk. He asked me about my career, why would I want to do this kind of thing, and I explained to him, because I think it means something, it helps. And I talk to people every day. It doesn't scare me to talk to anybody. And he gave me like a little, like a little questionnaire to fill out. And he said, "You'll hear from me very soon." He says, "Put that through department mail." And he winked at me and said, "You'll hear from me soon," meaning I was in. And sure enough, when they did the next class, I was called and I got in. And the criteria now has increased. You have to be a detective for at least 5 years, or detective supervisor for at least 5 years. You have to be recommended, of course, by a negotiator. You have to have a certain, history. Now they have you go through an interview process, a psychological test, and so. But because he saw me working and doing, and not afraid to do it, he told me straight out. He says, "The reason why you're here is because you didn't hesitate. I asked you to do something, you just did it." He said, "And you did it. You seem like you're good at it. You seem like a natural." And like I said, the training was the best training. I mean, I've been through homicide courses, interview and interrogation courses, criminal investigation courses, money laundering, auto crime, sex crimes, you name it, I've been through courses. This by far was the best training I ever received.